Hi, I'm Gene Bergman, and welcome to Burlington Progressives TV. For those of you who are watching live, know that it is a gorgeous April day. And for those who are watching not live, well, we'll find out what the weather is going to be. Gene Bergman, I am the Ward 2 City Councilor, and I'm joined here with my newly re-elected friend, Merrick Broderick, who was the Ward 8 City Councilor and continues to be because he just got the election, just got re-elected, and I'm so pleased to be your council mate, and thank you for joining me on this. What I wanted to do as part of this update is just go through some reflections that you have on the campaign itself, because people know that campaigning is tough, and you were in a serious campaign. And so that's important, I think, to share. It's part of what the democratic process is about. So your reflections on that, and then like to hear some about reflections on the first term. This will be now, you're starting your second term there, so what your highlights were, the lessons that you may have learned from that time, and then we'll sort of move to the present. So welcome, thanks again for joining me, Merrick, and talk to us about the campaign.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gene, for having me on, and thank you to Town Meeting TV for making the show possible. So in this March, I was re-elected to the Ward 8 seat on the Burlington City Council. Extremely grateful to all the folks that decided to come out and say that I was doing a good job and that it's worth me continuing to do that job. I think some of the big ticket reflections for me, just looking at the results alone, we got 61% of the vote this time around compared to 57% in 2024.
That's impressive.
I'd say so. I think it speaks to a lot of things, many underlying narratives that I had heard going into this election, that my seat dethroning an incumbent was a fluke, that it was due to the mayoral year that our mayor, Mulvaney Stanek, had carried seats like mine to victory, I think, and now here in 2026 in a non-mayoral year, increasing our margin by 4 points, I think says a lot about the dynamics of that race and now the dynamics of this race. In terms of my campaign itself, we put the work in. Like, I think that we knocked every door that we had access to in the ward. In the off-campus areas, we knocked every door 7 times. I think that
7 times.
I think that we were out in like the last month of the election. We were out every single weekend. We were getting 10 plus volunteers out, and not just the same 10 people either. That speaks volumes to I think the difference when it comes to leftist campaigns, progressive campaigns, grassroots campaigns like ours, when we have not just exciting candidates, but exciting issues, exciting in the sense that people want to make their voice heard on it and elect people or re-elect people who are speaking to those issues and speaking for the community. As a member of that community, people will turn out not just to vote, but to do everything that they can. And my volunteer base was not just made up of Ward 8ers, not just made up of Burlingtonians, people from around the state, and even some comrades down in central Massachusetts with Worcester Democratic Socialists of America decided to come up because we're part of a movement. It's not just a Burlington movement. It's not just a Vermont movement. It's not even just an American movement. It's a global movement, and we look out for each other. We all have the same goal.
I mean, you went down to New York early in Mondami's campaign to door knock.
That's right.
And that's important. I want to tell you, I enjoy door knocking with you. I have a great time going out there and connecting with people and explaining why it is important, why it was important for you to be reelected, why it's important for the bigger issues for Burlington and also for me, you know, and without you, my job is significantly harder. So it was wonderful, and there is really nothing like connecting with people at the door, at their home, at their door, if they're interested and willing to talk to you. Or, you know, the time of year can make it that tough, but you know, we were lucky to not have a brutally cold day. So
yeah, there were a lot of cold days.
Yeah, there were.
But people still came out, and again, like, I'm just eternally grateful that people still view me as an important part of this movement here in the electoral sphere, at least. And then, so moving on to another reflection that I've been sitting on a lot is that that despite us, you know, increasing our margin, turnout was still quite low in Ward 8, and
was it more this year though than the last year?
in terms of percentage, I think so, but still an outlier compared to the other wards in the city. That continues to be something, and we did everything that I think we possibly could. We raised an incredible amount of money, in my opinion, about $15,000.
That's a lot of money.
And we put that money to work, and we tried our best in terms of the social media game to appear on everybody's phones. We did YouTube ads, which was a pretty incredible experience. Like sitting down, trying to disconnect from the election for at least like a couple minutes, turning on YouTube and look, it's my face telling me to vote for me. But I do know that did make a big difference, especially on campus where it's been historically extremely difficult to break through to people. I heard stories of professors putting on videos for their class, and then, oh look, it's Merrick on the screen. That was huge to just get the message out there, show people who otherwise are not as linked in to city politics that not only is there an election happening, that it's an important election, and that a candidate that's fighting for you is running. But I think that reflection has stuck with me, that despite all of that, the turnout was still quite low. And when we get to later topics on the agenda, for me, that reflection is sitting with me.
Sure. Well, I mean, and just to like fill in a little bit of that that blank, do you have some initial thoughts about why it is low in that district?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like a really large proportion of Ward 8 is on-campus college students, whether it's Champlain College or the University of Vermont, and it's historically been very difficult to reach voters there. It's hard to knock doors inside of dorm buildings. You can table, you can poster. We did all of that, working with clubs on campus to get the message out that way. But as we know, it's not the same as being able to knock on someone's door and speak to them. And I think accessibility is also a contributing factor here.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if you live in Burlington, whether you are in a college dorm or in a house, I guess, you are a resident of Burlington, and therefore you can vote in Vermont elections. You just need to register, and that's something that people aren't thinking about when they come up here. They're from their own home state. They're probably more tapped in to the place that they've been living for a decade than the place that they've been living in for a couple months. But I mean, the reality is that if you live on campus, you are living here 3/4 of the year. So I would consider that to be one's primary residence, even if it's just for 4 years. And you are just as much a Burlington resident as anyone else, and you're just as deserving as any other Burlington resident to be involved in our democracy and make your voice heard. So there's that part of the accessibility, because despite same-day registration, despite a lot of the pro-democracy initiatives that we have here in Vermont and in Burlington. It's an information battle, informing people and then getting them energized. I think we have the energy that gets people excited about voting for our candidates. It's just about turning them out, and I think that leads into my other part of this, where it's getting people to go and vote. You have to be registered by a certain day to get a ballot mailed in. You have to make sure that you are registered with the dorm address under the mailing address. That's quite specific, depending on where you live on campus, to make sure that you get that mail-in ballot into your mailbox. And if you want to vote on election day, thankfully the University of Vermont at least has the day off from school then. But you're a college student. What do you want to do on your day off? I might want to go and vote on my day off, but I don't think.
And it's not just that day off, is it? Or I mean, it used to. I mean, wasn't it still part of like a break?
It's not part of break.
Okay, so it is just the day off.
Yes, it's just the day off. And Champlain College doesn't even have that.
Okay.
So we've commonly tried to get people to vote early, to register early, to get your mail-in ballot, and vote when you have a free chance. Go down to City Hall, put it in the drop box, or give it to the clerk, and now you have your day is free. But again, the problems of getting people registered early enough and securing that mail-in ballot has problems. And then even just the process of having to walk from University Heights down to City Hall just to put your ballot in a drop box. I think for me, it gets me thinking about how can we make that easier for students.
Yeah, like a drop box up at the university.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, sophomores have been here for a while. They have a much easier time relating to the city and how important it is, and how important the sidewalk is when you're coming down the hill, or how important the street lighting is if you're at night and you're coming back up the hill, or just the safety issues that are there, let alone all of the opportunities that people have. Freshmen, not so much, and it's, I think, still the rare freshman that is really tuned in to their hometown in a political way. They're just graduated high school, and that's their universal, though not necessarily solely. So I mean, looking at people in their realities is something that we could probably do a much better job of, because you're right, people are here, and what happens here in our city, in our region, deeply affects them. I mean, their life may be just go from the dorm to a class, from the class to the library, or to the Davis Center, or what have you. But most people are living social lives, and the campus is so connected to the community, and the draw of the community is so big that even freshmen, but freshmen get connected to town in a way sometime in the mid-fall. And so making that connection that you were talking about this being your residence, and how important it is for you to understand what the nature of where you live is, and that you have an ability to influence things, is really important. So the fact that you have been a student, you're taking a break right now, but and you're connected to that world, is, to me, as an old man, as a former student, it is really, really important, because we in a lot of ways tend to look at students in other ways that are not necessarily favorable, as just money to spend downtown, as a pain because they're loud and they're young, and perhaps are not thinking as much about their neighbors when they're being young at night. We've had those issues for a very long time, and everything sort of in between. So having a connection with them, a personal connection is really important, and that leads to sort of the second question that I had, and obviously continued reflections on the campaign itself are fine, but reflections on your first term, because I know that you've done things that have a real impact and are important to students.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd say joining the council for the first time is kind of being dunked into a frying pan a little bit. It's a learning curve for sure, and especially with a new mayoral administration who's going through 10 times as steep of a learning curve as I was probably. Contributes to that a lot too, I think, and also almost half the council got replaced. I think 5 new councilors. So we all were learning together, I guess, and but yeah, once I kind of just like got into just the flow of things, got thinking about how can I turn our message into something that allows us to bring the movement into City Hall. That's when I think I really started. And we, as progressives, we hit our stride in the past 2 years. So like my first piece of policy that you and I worked on together, that being the building emissions reduction ordinance, that was something that came to us from the community, from climate organizations like Run on Climate and the Climate Action Collectives, saying that this is something that we should work on. We should continue the legacy of here in Burlington on reducing our carbon impact on the environment, and we see the consequences of climate change in Vermont every single summer and in the winter.
And apparently in the total collapse of this current in the Atlantic that is going to wreak havoc for a millennia, maybe. It's fairly striking.
Yeah. And even if Burlington is even if Burlington was the #1 city in the country, or even the #1 city in the world in terms of our fighting against climate change, we can always continue to do better. And our contribution to that was starting the process of a building emissions reduction ordinance for specifically our larger commercial buildings. We've started what I would consider step 0 of that process in my first year on the council, that being doing energy benchmarking, establishing those baselines for how much energy buildings are producing, are expending via heat.
I mean, you're a science major, right? And so talk to us about why that's really important to start with benchmarking.
Yeah, so we specifically sought to tackle emissions due to heat expenditure, a lot of which in Burlington is done via natural gas. And what our end goal of that would be is to encourage the electrification of our heating systems, and tapping into our city grid, which is not fully what I would consider clean energy, but I'd say it's pretty good. It's one of the best, I'd say, and getting better. So, but every commercial building is different. There's different uses. There's kitchens that do produce heat energy in the form of they need their gas-powered stoves. And so they're going to use more for different reasons than a retail store that is just heating the building. Yeah. So figuring out what, and then there's the factors of the age of the building, what the building is made out of, what the current heating system is, and then so putting all these things into categories and figuring out processes that can reasonably be done in a reasonable amount of time and for a reasonable amount of money to get us to a point as quickly as possible that we are reducing emissions and establishing a stepwise process where by date X you are getting your emissions down for this sector to this point, continuing that until we get to a point that we've decided is significant progress. So we're hopefully in the next two years going to hear the results of that sooner than later, and we can get working on actual policy. And so that was my first dip into the legislative process, and
we passed that unanimously, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the energy benchmarking.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think, a great first start. And then the other piece of policy that I led the way on the council was the dorm resolution, and that was probably my proudest moment on the council in my
Talk to us
in
a
my
little
first
bit more.
term. Yeah, so it's well known among students at UVM the condition of many of UVM's dorms. They're old, they're rapidly aging, and have, as we've seen in the media, a lot of problems regarding moisture and mold and pests, and temperature, things of that sort. And so taking that knowledge that I personally had and working with groups in the community on campus, like the Student Tenant Union, went into our laws to see, like, why has this been on the back burner for the city to take action on? And that's when I discovered that college dormitories are exempt from regular inspection by the city, as long as they certify with the city that their dorms are up to code. And so asking the head of permanent inspections for these past certificates to see like how new is this problem, or what role is the city playing in potentially allowing these dorms to dilapidate. And it turns out that we don't have certifications. We've not asked for them, and we've not received them. And so that shows a failing on two sides. That shows an obvious failing by the University of Vermont to follow our ordinances, and Champlain College too, to a failing in following our ordinances. But just as much, in my opinion, shows a failing by the city to actually hold these institutions accountable. So that's what we got to work on, trying to hold these institutions accountable and come to solutions that improve the housing conditions for freshman and sophomore year students on campus. And that took a ton of organization, mostly done by the Student Tenant Union, turning people out to multiple public forums, demanding action by the council, you and I in the negotiation room, trying to get this resolution passed that among other things tasked our ordinance committee with bringing all sides to the table and working out solutions. And you can, as a member of the ordinance committee, you can speak to how that's going.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, to me, it's one of the same issues that I was talking about before in the way that the city looks at students. There's a concept called benign neglect. And it's something actually that Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a policy official in the Johnson and Nixon administrations, coined for the way that the system, the federal system in particular, should be dealing with black and brown folks. And the country is burning at that time. Dr. King's assassinated after a decade and a half of trying to right the apartheid system, or to eliminate the apartheid system. And so the benign neglect that we had in Burlington, in part, is very similar in terms of the way that we looked at at student housing. And I mean, I have to, as somebody who worked as a city attorney for 20 years. I mean, I've said this publicly. I've raised my hand. I share in that blame. I was the interim code director for, you know, 2 10-month terms, and while my focus was on other things, but clearly it's also that I didn't have to think about this, that somebody else was going to do it, and you know, and that is not good government. It's not what a democratic system should be doing. So it's sort of like doing penance to you know, to make that, and this is from a good Jewish Unitarian boy, to try to make the system work in the way that the words of the ordinance that exist, you know, are clear. You've got to certify. Now, obviously, what we've figured out is that that's just too easy to evade if you've got other things that are on your mind and you want to deal with. And you don't want to deal with this. So we're in fact talking about changes to the ordinance today in the ordinance committee, with the hope that at our next meeting we will pass it out. There's a few little glitches that came up that I think, well, that will lead us to not be able to pass it out today. But my intent as the chair of the committee is to actually get right to it. And these are the sort of the bigger structural questions about how we go about ensuring that UVM students have safe housing. And so part of it is the certification system and really clarifying that. It's also the notification to students when they're tenants, they're residents, that if they're not satisfied with the responses of the university, that they can call the code enforcement office. Because in truth, the city inspecting, I think probably close to 4,400 additional living units and many buildings is a major undertaking, and we should, in my mind, try to do what we can under a system which is not as burdensome and not as expensive, if we can do that. And so that's where we're going to try to go, knowing full well that if we get blown off, then all bets are off. But one of the other things that I know, and you have experience in this, is we got a lot of complaints about forced triples, about people going into rooms that were not built for 3 people to be living in, and there are 3 roommates in this room, for your studying, for your sleeping, for all of the things that you would do in sort of a living room, living area, sleeping area, study area. And so the nature of that room and the way that we define either dwelling unit or sleeping room, they sort of are mismatched at this point in time, because this is in an educational setting as well, and it's in a big dormitory setting. So this is an area that we're going to need to do some more work on, and I'm going to hold the jurisdiction to deal with that particular problem, and see if we can come to a definition that we can propose to the council for amending it, because it's a live issue. So that's sort of where we are as of today. Yeah. On that. Yeah. Other highlights, be they things that you passed, or that you worked on, or that you lost, because maybe this is not highlights as much as, there's highlights and lowlights. Yeah. Also.
No, I think and I think we can all speak to this, where I think one of the bigger highlights for me, whether we won or lost on a particular issue, is just being able to stand with the community on a myriad of issues, whether it's with stuff like this, standing with students on campus for demanding better housing, habitable housing. I spent a lot of time at the Palestine Solidarity Encampment at UVM in solidarity with the students. I was a student at the time, so in solidarity with myself too, I guess, but with my constituents, and standing up against the genocide in Gaza, inside City Hall, defending free speech and calling for the release of the political prisoners of the Trump administration. Standing with our unhoused neighbors and our mutual aid organizations like Food Not Bombs, fighting tooth and nail to protect them from being expelled from our downtown. Same goes for our unhoused neighbors, protecting them from being expelled from downtown.
I mean, you actually were fed. You have financial challenges, and that Food Not Cops or the People's Kitchen were, from my observation, were just important to you. So I think just being able to be kind of like a megaphone within City Hall for our movement. Whether we're winning on a particular issue or we're losing on a particular issue, being able to amplify the voices in our community that are often not heard in City Hall, and raising the consciousness of our community, showing the inequities in our system, and showing people that a better world is possible through the community. Yeah. I mean, I'm there with you. It gives me great pride to be able to stand on the values that I have, to be able to look myself in the mirror and say that I was true to who I am, to be able to look at my kids and my grandkids and do the same, and to look, in a way abstractly at those people who are not right in front of me, but are suffering as a result of the actions that my tax dollars in part goes to fund, is really, really important. So I'm really pleased that we're able to do that. This is why I got involved in politics, and 1970 or so, I guess, is really when 1969, during the war in Vietnam, and why I'm a member of the Progressive Party, because it's so important to me that somebody stand up and do this. It's always striking to me when I hear that all we should do is look at sort of the small world right in front of us. The threat of nuclear annihilation, as well as climate annihilation, is as great as it's been since the early days of the Cold War, around Korea and stuff. And to hear people say that that's not a local issue, particularly when you have F-35s who are capable of carrying nuclear weapons based in the Burlington International Airport, is just something that I'm really proud that I'm not the lone voice in raising. So that's, I think, they are highlights, even though we lost as many of those fights as we won. Lessons. I've been doing this for a long time, both inside as a counselor, but also inside the government, and then for in an equally long time, maybe not actually now, on the outside. If we count the city council as being, sort of a representative, but it's not a full-time job, then you can be in both camps at the same time. So there are lessons that I've learned that are sort of, I've just made them part of who I am. But you're doing this fresh,
Yeah.
right? And so, what are some of the lessons? Both the micro. And this is a great show because we get a chance to talk to people about how things work or don't work, and another way to do things. So you sharing the lessons is actually really, really important for anybody who is going to come next or is interested in that. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think the most important lesson, one that I knew, I guess, but it was affirmed to me once becoming elected, and attempting to get policy passed that that people need to take to heart when they decide to choose this role in our movement, is that change and systemic change, what we call non-reformist reform, changes that come through our system but are with the sole intent of changing people's material conditions and I guess changing the system itself. That power for people like you and I to accomplish those things, they flow directly from the community, and require the community to be behind these things that we do. So whether let's talk about the dorm resolution as a huge example. So that's something that I had been interested in personally by running when I ran for office the first time, and in my first few months on the council. And sure, you and I could have whipped something up and brought it to the floor, and I don't think it would have passed.
You were absolutely correct.
I simply don't believe it. I believe that
the opposition that we had, or even with all those people, was intense.
Exactly. When you're trying to change the system, or you're trying to go up against the largest institutions in our state, let alone our city, the opposition is fierce. The opposition is ironclad in their desire to maintain the status quo or eat around the edges of change, and you have to kick the door open in a sense. The community has to turn out, and they have to put the heat on the status quo. They have to put the heat on these institutions. And so, how we did that? We blasted this all through the media, not just showing up to council meetings, holding events on campus and bringing the media to hear from students personally, getting it out to the parent Facebook groups, like students telling their parents, like, these are the conditions that I have to live under. Can you believe it? And those are the people that pay the salaries of the UVM administrators, and those are you have to target the wallet. It's why we have it's why we do economic boycotts. It's why we go on strike. It's why we organize. It's to make change. You have to hurt people in their wallet. So, or at least threaten that by not siding with the people. And when we turned the heat up, and we held our line in places like in negotiations on our resolution, we got gains, and we were able to accomplish something despite being in the council minority, and it is now leading to what will hopefully become material change for students. And that So my advice is that to the people who come after us is that if you want to create change, it has to flow through the community, and you need to have the support of the community.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that in terms of that, people need to say, what does that mean? So part of it is just being able to reveal the conditions. So yeah, the media is a tool, but it's a tool to reveal what life has, it has for us. And so being able to have pictures of the mushrooms growing out of the ceiling, of other mold, of having the stories about the heat problems, which include not only overheating but underheating, and air conditioning that's not working, other things and the long-standing nature of the complaint process and how difficult it was to activate, and how students didn't even know that they could complain to the city because the system itself that they had in place is not working. Those are stories that need to be brought, because when you look at folks in the political process that are inclined to give the status quo the benefit of the doubt at the very least, and sometimes are just in lockstep with the status quo, you do have a chance, particularly on local things. This is why I love to work in local politics, to change people's heart, because it's just not acceptable. And in this community, where you've got so many people who were actually students at one point, or had students who at UVM, who are now in positions in the community of influence and power, including at the city council, that's something which is hard to ignore. I mean, the other aspect of it is being able to really know the laws, how the system works, because what you're looking to do is change that. It's just not, here, fix it, and then you end up giving it to somebody else to fix. No, this is our job, is to help fix it, and we can only fix it when we've got enough information, which is why I think it was incredibly important for you to take the time to work with the code director and the administration to work through these things, because this is complicated. You're also dealing with a new president at the university and a new mayor, and they've got a relationship, and we want that relationship. I want that relationship to work to the benefit of both institutions, because they are on not exactly the same way, but they're public institutions that are ostensibly building the commonwealth and health here. So we need them to be working in that way. So giving the mayor and the president the chance to work together has meant that when I speak at the ordinance committee, and I say to folks, I really believe that the university and the students have a common interest in habitability. That I think is genuine, and it is also a politically astute thing to do, and politics is something where we want to do meaningful things. Sometimes that is just in how we represent, but other times, and for the most part, it's in actually what we build, the laws, the policies, the programs, the budgets, and all of that stuff. So that was really, I think, it's a continuing lesson for me, right? Because everything is sort of different, and how you work through a particular issue gives you insights that you couldn't have until you actually went through and did it. It's that sort of the material basis of this work. So that was really good, and then just sort of crafting a plan That's what the resolution did. It sort of crafted the plan so that we could then continue to go through it. Again, just didn't throw it into, the system to say, here, fix this. And I think then the last thing is what you mentioned too, is negotiating is hard, and it's an art. And the president may have, and I mean now the Fuhrer in Washington, may have been successful in the bluster and all of the aggressive stuff that he did when he was in private business. But the idea that you can flip back and forth as he's doing with Iran right now, where you threaten to blow them back to the Stone Age in one hand, and the other hand you say, oh, we're getting close, I'm going to win, I'm winning anyway, so forget it. That's not effective. Being strong sometimes means you get to hold the line, and we did that in this resolution in terms of things like making sure that the information that the university had been putting out before was revealed to the public, even though it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Right? Because, people need to know that. Why should I, give that up? Right? It's an important piece of all of this context. And if you allow people to bury that, then the system gets one more way to perpetuate the wrongs that need to be corrected. So we held on that. And we were right. Now, I mean, it wasn't just, we're being obstinate, but we're right to do that. And the other side was like, for whatever reason, whether they thought it was right, some I'm sure did. Others said, this is, this will piss the university off, and I don't want to embarrass them or something like that. But okay, we're not going to vote against the whole thing. And it's embarrassing to say, well, what's true is it shouldn't be in there. And then we also gave in terms of language. So that give and take, which when you're on the outside, when you're in the movement and you don't have to do this sort of on a regular basis, can feel wrong, I think. I mean, I know that, right? Because I still do that work. And so this is sort of part of the lesson that we ourselves learn, and we try to both teach and have people then reflect as to, whether we've done it right or not. I think we've done that right. We are moving close, right? We got about 12 minutes left or so. And so let's turn to now. Let's turn to the pressing issues that you see. Let's turn to your agenda for this year.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, optimistic agenda is what I would call this. We all come in with agendas, and in 2 years we got, I listed 3 things that we talked about. So optimistic, but yeah, so I guess what are people talking about right now? Of course, they're talking about the president and the rise of fascism and its tendrils spreading to all corners of our country and the world. Specifically in regards to ICE and what we need to do as a city to protect our neighbors and remove our complicity in the actions of our fascist federal government. And so that speaks back to the events on Dorset Street in South Burlington on March 11th. Making sure that Burlington's role in that, in the way that it was carried out, assisting ICE in executing an unconstitutional action, making sure that we are not complicit in that in the future. And that is a process that's obviously ongoing from an investigation standpoint, and that we need to, like we said, we need to continue to hold the line in favor of humanity and the humanity of our neighbors, and look at what went wrong, and what changes must be made, and they need to be made as soon as we possibly can, because this will happen again.
Yeah.
It is continuously happening. So there's that, and then the overarching issue that always sticks with me is housing and tenants' rights. The housing crisis is not going away, and we have been working to create a future where we are doing all that we can as a city to alleviate this crisis. And so what I think about most is the utilization of our housing trust fund. How do we get more money into that through existing policies like inclusionary zoning and other existing policies to get more money into the housing trust fund, and then how do we deploy that money for the creation or the acquisition of permanently affordable housing, and sort of taking housing off the market, decommodifying it. That's the future that we all want.
Yeah, I think it is pretty clear that for a huge swath of the population, whether it's a majority or it's a large plurality, this concept that somehow you're actually, the commodification of housing makes you wealthier, if it did exist at a certain point, is just not happening. I think it was fairly unique in the way that the capitalism after World War II operated with the New Deal that made that really possible. And so you look at times prior to that, where you had social housing policies that were different because they provided people with security. It's particularly hard. We do need to get the deal with how you build generational economic security, wealth. And it would appear, since if you sell your house now for $1 gazillion, you're paying $1 gazillion plus for the next house. So it's not really giving you anything. It does give you the ability to borrow money, right, and to leverage it for other things like that. But that, if people don't have growing security with their monthly bills and what have you, it does not seem to be to be right. It seems mostly that what we need to do is to continue to build the housing security of people, and then their ability to to create the wealth that's necessary for them to thrive, to raise their kids, to live in dignity as old people. So yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. It's and then moving off of that, and I'm gonna just rattle off because we're running low on time, and I want to get to something. So
sorry.
Connected to housing is tenants' rights, and as we know, Burlington as a city does not have a lot of power to protect tenants and their housing security. Just cause eviction has been sitting in the State House, rotting for years. Probably, I think before I was even in Burlington, it's been rotting there, and but I don't see that as an excuse for us to not try to push for more to protect the renters in our city. So I've just been put on the charter change committee with you. So the things that I'm sort of thinking about from that is and getting community backing and organization behind things, of course, including things like rent stabilization and community option to purchase or tenant option to purchase. So if you're a group of tenants and your building is going to be sold, there are consequences to that for the tenants. It just does not mean your lease is going to transfer necessarily. You could just get evicted, or you can be rent evicted. The new landlord could just jack your rates up because we don't have rent stabilization. So there needs to be a mechanism for either a tenant organization or a tenant union within a building to seek lines of credit or donations or financial
the
assistance,
housing trust
dollars to purchase their buildings for market price and having priority in that respect, the first right of refusal.
Yeah.
And then allowing community organizations like the Champlain Housing Trust or even the city itself to be a part of that process in order to, again, make housing permanently affordable and taking it off of the market. And then I guess the last thing that I want to talk about, because it's the thing that I'm currently working on right now, is in regards to protecting our neighbors, specifically our queer neighbors here in Burlington. I'm working with a community organization called Trans Plus that operates on and off campus within the city of Burlington, and we are working on, in the style of the dorm resolution, a LGBTQ plus sanctuary city resolution, where I must be vague because we are still trying to figure out what the city is allowed to do in terms of protecting queer Burlingtonians. But things that I'm thinking about that we can do immediately through the mayor's office is creating accessible information for not just queer Burlingtonians, but folks across the country who, in states that are not Vermont, are being actively persecuted by their state governments simply for identifying with who they are. So giving information on pathways to Vermont residency, information on your right to get your case sealed if you seek a sex change, distributing funding to community organizations that support queer Vermonters, and doing programming, Know Your Rights programming. And then that's stuff that I believe that we could do now. Just providing that information to people alone is valuable. And then looking into our powers as the city to see what we can do in terms of ordinance to protect folks. I'm thinking about the concept of banning bans, banning the ability to ban trans folks for participating in athletics. We obviously don't have a ban, but this is a ban of bans.
Sure.
And preventing the discrimination of trans folks in gendered spaces such as bathrooms, changing rooms, etc. I'm hoping that that's going to be styled like the dorm resolution, where we have a resolution. It's going to have a list of actions that the administration, after talking to the administration, are things that can be implemented, and then a clause tasking our ordinance committee with input from the community to come up with with an ordinance enshrining Burlington as a sanctuary city and making it having these protections that we do have the power to do. And that's just another example of what I would consider Vermont being, Vermont and in this case Burlington being the tip of the spear for the country in protecting the rights of people and becoming, sort of a beacon. People are fleeing their home states to flee this persecution that we are seeing of trans people across the country, and they're looking at states like Vermont who do not have these policies in place that we see across the country, and how can we do our part to not just protect queer Burlingtonians that are currently here, but to be a safe haven for folks.
Yeah. At the end of the day, all of these three areas, the ICE, the housing, the protection of trans and other persecuted people, speaks to how we as a community and its local government as the representative treat the most vulnerable, the least of us, as I think Jesus talked about. And it's absolutely essential if you're going to have a world, a society, a city that is good and healthy and kind which is the land that I want to live in. I do not want to live in the land of Stephen Miller and the just nihilistic might makes right way. So we have a lot. I will hope that we can do this again with your comrades and friends and neighbors sitting with us, so we can sort of meld that government and community action, and we get a chance to explore, the individually. But thank you for taking this time. This is grand, and I totally appreciate you being here, you being with me in this struggle. Thank you all for tuning in and listening to Burlington Progressives TV. We will see you the next time. Thank you.